Hi there. Today I have a little bit of something on my heart I want to talk about. I'm not the only one talking about, but not enough people are talking about it, and it's a problem. It's always been the way that it's supposed to be in America, not just in Michigan, but in America. We don't want to jail people who didn't cause the crime, but our judicial system has a lot of gaps. It's not like God's system, which is perfect and flawless. Man is not perfect and flawless. That's why God can't stress enough that man's ways are not God's ways. And often we make errors and we put away people who do not deserve to be there. The one thing I do like about Michigan is that there is not a death penalty. I don't agree with the death penalty because there is a curse associated with red rumming a red rummer. And I'm used to doing YouTube videos, so you can tell. When I say red rum, I mean the M word that maybe we don't want to say. But in Michigan, in October 21st, 2023, Samantha Woll was found outside of her townhouse, demised. And they called 911. There wasn't a whole lot of shot. I mean, like, the neighbors discussed finding her almost like they would discuss whether or not they wanted ranch on the side of their onion rings or not. It was really cold. But this is Detroit, and Detroit doesn't have the best reputation for being the safest place to be. She had become the president of the synagogue in Detroit. She campaigned for that synagogue and turned that synagogue around, brought people in, brought donations in, and saved it from going under. One of the things we'll note is that this synagogue is progressive to have a female president because, well, Orthodox Jews, there's differences between the different types of Jew, and I am Christian, they are Jews. I believe in Christ. Some believe in Christ to the Jews and some do not. It's a personal choice. Some don't even believe in God. Just because they're Jew does not mean that they believe in God and that they follow the Bible. Just put that out there too. But now we're going to get back on track because Samantha was in a horrible state. She had already, rigor mortis had set in. And so this is one of the key things that set me to this case was not right. I couldn't figure it out. At first, you're like, oh yeah, they're going to say anything at all to make themselves look innocent. But as the trial the first day went on, as Brian Brown continued to speak, he had said things that made a lot of sense, whereas prosecution was presenting things that didn't fit to me. Like, for one, if she was red rummed at 4 o'clock in the morning, like they believed, she moved at some point, but like they kind of indicate that she was in this time span, rigor mortis would not have set in that quickly. And I understand that she lost life force, and I do. My mom didn't lose life force. My mom passed away on a waterbed that was cold. And rigor mortis set in. She passed away at like 10 o'clock in the morning. 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4. Between 4 and 5 is when my brothers and sisters found her 7 hours later. And that's accelerated on a cold waterbed. 7 hours. Maybe 6. Give or take an hour or two. There were handprints all over the walls that they claimed they couldn't get fingerprints out of. But it made sense to me that if she's found out on the sidewalk, that at some point she moved from inside of her house to outside, especially with the amount of life force that was all over that house. It was copious. That was the word that was used all the way through. Copious amounts of life force. Not just a small amount. It was impossible to walk through that house without stepping in some and smearing some. And they had some officers that came in and claimed that they walked around without little foot pads and didn't touch anything. I don't buy that either, because it was no exaggeration. There were copious amounts of blood across that first floor. They also did find down on the floor in the basement drops of life force. They did not test the sink. They did not test the life force that was down there to identify if it was maybe Samantha's or not. They did not do any kind of anything about that because they say, well, the second door in the basement was locked, so there's no way that anybody could have come and went. So it was very highly unlikely, but there were a couple of drops of life force going down the stairs. Enough to draw enough question to make you wonder, why didn't they at least test it? Samantha was stabbed. She wasn't just stabbed anywhere. She was stabbed in the back of the head and in her chin, in her head. And most people who follow true crime recognize something that is known as a crime of passion, which indicates that the person who is doing the crime is angry because they have some kind of feelings, because the kind of anger that is generated in this kind of crime does not come from a stranger. It is an emotion-based rage. And typically people with emotion-based rages go for the face and the head. And she had stab wounds in the chin and in the back of the head. She had gone to a wedding that night. She came home and she took her dress off and she laid it on the bed and she went downstairs and she ate a banana, well, half a banana. Apparently she smoked a vape, because here in Michigan it's legal to smoke marijuana products. They think that when she opened the back door. And there's indicating idea that maybe that's where somebody came in and harmed her at. I don't like the way that the prosecutor victim blamed. Like, if she had not opened her door, this would not have happened to her. If somebody has ill intent, they're going to do it with the door closed or not. They tend to break windows or break in. And with that kind of rage, and I do believe it was a crime of passion. Now, what they're basing times on, which is even more disturbing, is a sensor, very similar to the kind of alarms that I used to work in an AFC home, and they used to put alarms on the doors and windows because these were they were people that needed to be watched. And if they went out of the house, we needed to be aware because they were not safe to be wandering on their own. So they would line up. They were sensor alarms, and you can buy similar in the store, and they'll just go rear, 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 and you'll hear them. And this is what the ADT alarm was on the doors and on the windows in Samantha Woll's house. If they even misalign just a little bit, they will register that somebody opened the door. But if they do not open far enough for the sensors to disconnect their meeting point, they won't register that the door is open. And likewise, if they never come back together close enough, if the door is shut just so, but they don't quite meet their path, it will register as still open. It recognizes movement somehow, but it didn't have a camera to show what was going on. Although the ADT control center that she had upstairs in the office with her laptop had a camera on it. And at first they had said, no, there wouldn't be any camera video there. And then later we had learned that, yes, it did have the potential to take video on the monitor part. But for the rest of the house, I don't know how that all worked. I don't understand the ADT alarm system, short of the fact that I do recognize that they were all just sensors across the windows and doors. And sensors, it's capable to put like a pin camera in them, but I don't think that they did equip these with them. Just motion sensors and LED laser lights, so that when you cross the path of the laser light, it would register that you were moving, and it could register to a certain amount on the floor. They had spoke about people crawling on the floor. And to a certain degree, being down on the floor, it would register, but after a certain point, I do believe that they were trying to say that Sam being directly on the floor, laying down, would not have any movement that she might have made at that point, might not have been registered because she might not have been high enough up for the laser beam to hit her, so they would not really be able to tell if she moved from the hallway outside on her own. I mean, she had to have. Nobody dragged her. There weren't drag marks. There were blood spots. There was no forced entry. The spare key was found on the ground in the doorway with droplets of life force all over it. And things of value were not taken. There was a $20 bill. Her credit cards were still there. Her really, really expensive bike. She had a computer upstairs. She had just various little things around the house that would have had some kind of value to a petty thief. So we were stuck with this idea, who harmed Samantha Woll? And for a while they wondered if it might have been anti-Semitic, because, well, let's face it, down in Detroit there is Muslims now, and they've been there for a while, And you would think that the Muslims and the Jews would not get along, but Samantha, even, this is why I'm not leaning so much that it was a hate crime as much as what they did at the beginning. Samantha carved out a good relationship with the Muslims that lived in Detroit, with the Jews. They weren't arguing back and forth. They had some kind of coalition. They had made some kind of a program happen where they affiliated and got along with each other. So that goes off the table, because why then would they plot something like that when they find peace and harmony to live together? Well, there was a neighbor that claimed he heard a scream, and then he changed his testimony. And then he said when they put him on the stand that it must have been somebody at the casino with a bullhorn yelling promotional things. But a woman screaming in fear for her life is a whole lot different than somebody yelling through a bullhorn about coming in and going to the casino. And I think that was the first, and he was like the first couple days. So I had questions when Brian Brown did his opening statement. And I didn't like how calm the neighbors that testified first were. But when the third neighbor came up, the one that said that he heard the scream and then took it back, that bothered me. Why would you redact something like that you were so solid about to begin with, all the way up to the point of the trial? But he redacted it, and he said that he was sure it was somebody from at the casino, and he even questioned more, still held on to that. And so there is something that happened all the way through this trial that needs to be noted right from the start, is there was a lot of lying going on. And it wasn't just Michael Jackson Bolanos who did the lying. I kind of got the feeling like they just, nope, it's better for me to keep my mouth shut. And so I don't know. And then they actually caught, towards the end of the trial, one of the officers outright lying on the stand. They did not do anything about that. He walked out of there just fine. Well, why are they going to punish the one cop when every single other person they put on the stand withheld something, gave half answers in some way? It was uncooperative. It's like giving the bare minimum answer that they possibly could give to look like they were giving an effort to be honest in their testimony, but it wasn't honest. If it was honest, nobody would be pointing a finger at Michael Jackson Bolanos in this. And I have good reasons why. They caught him on camera. They did this. My friend Tracy Lee from The Alternate Point of View, her and I have called this the Frankenstein video for so long, because it's just pieced together. Just little pieces from little places all over town. From the time Michael Jackson Bolanos left his house, they put this green circle on the screen with this little figure walking around that you can't even be sure who it is because you can't see the face. There's a couple times that you know it's him. He's clear enough. There's one time they go to this Gordon food service and they say it's him going from one side to around to the other, and they pick it up on another angle, but you can't really tell who's in the circle. It's blurry, like it does all the way through. There's only just a couple times where you can kind of sort of decide that it's him, but it's not a clear shot of his face. It's not a clear shot of anything. They go back. Brian goes back to them and says, "Are you sure that this is him?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's him." And you're absolutely sure. And they go back around the corner to just 10 seconds before, and they show another man, another black man, walking the same direction that Michael Jackson Bolanos went. 10 seconds before Michael Jackson Bolanos even went across the parking lot. So the person in the picture, he admitted, well, it's probably not him. That's not evidence of a murder at Samantha Woll's house. Either way, when you have him walking at a Gordon food service down the road, I do not understand how, yes, he went and he broke into cars. And this is something that we need to put on the table. Michael Jackson Bolanos was not exactly being a Boy Scout that night. He wasn't. He was trying to collect information for stealing cars. He was getting into cars, taking whatever he could take that he could resell or use. Well, that night he wasn't so lucky, because what he came up with was a used tube of chapstick, a bag of candy, and a backpack with a bag with a couple of gloves in it, surgical gloves. He really didn't get that much. He had a couple pocket knives, and I will note that the pocket knives that he carried, the blades were nowhere near long enough to do the damage that they said was done in the stab wounds. But they still collected his knives, his 3-inch blade for a 6-inch hold, that they didn't even really, the medical examiner was not well trained or was not well experienced, because she did not measure the wounds. She did not measure the depth. You know that there's ways to do that. But for some reason, Michigan's medical examiner in Detroit had no idea how to measure a wound properly. That's half effort. She should not be in a job she doesn't know how to do completely. So they bring the expert in, the expert that understands crimes of passion. And he gets denied to be able to testify that it's a crime of passion because the judge denied it. And I will say, I felt all the way through this trial that this judge was very biased, and she should not have been the judge of this trial. And she did things that I felt were very, very, very prejudiced and wrong for a judge to do in the middle of a trial. She cut the defense off in every way possible, making it hard for him to even make a case to defend himself. Like, they all cut and just signed, sealed, and delivered him guilty, and no matter what, she was just there to navigate until it was over. That's how I felt about her. And then we found out later, when we learned some more things, that she was not actually even a criminal judge to begin with. She was a judge that dealt with real estate. And she was voted in to a job she didn't understand, to look at an expert in the world and tell him that he was wrong about a crime of passion, that there's no such thing. And by that time, I was so disgusted with that woman. At first, in the beginning, I thought, man, it'll be kind of neat to see where she goes. I kind of thought she seemed to have a good personality the first day, but as the trial went on for the month, it went on for, every time we started again, she would do something that would leave me more and more disgusted with her as a judge. You're not looking at a man that you have the right to just sign, seal, and deliver and throw in a cage. You're looking at a man that deserves to have a trial, a fair trial, just like any other human being. But for some reason, in Michigan and in Detroit, they have an awful lot of innocent men sitting down there that have not been tried the right way, that have just been signed, sealed, and delivered, and don't have a chance to get out of it. And now they're sending Michael Jackson Bolanos down the same road. And you know, I know this happens in Michigan because it's not just Detroit that does it. I know a lot of people that have a lot of reason to have problems with the justice system in Michigan. And a lot of people that step up. There was this one guy, he kept coming into our chats while we were watching it, trying to talk us out, calling him. One time he even called me a name that I was not happy with. And later I talked to him, and we're not like on bad terms. I don't fight with him. I don't talk to him about it much because I learned that he worked for the prosecutors. So it wasn't even a personal opinion that he's in there trying to talk to us about what we're seeing on a trial when we're watching the trial as a group. To pray for Michael Jackson Bolanos, to pray for a good outcome. And this guy's like, well, he's a murderer. He did it. And how can you be so sure? And the whole time, he collects a paycheck from the prosecuting office. So it's in his best interest to believe or to push the narrative that it had to be the petty car thief. The petty, not even car thief. All he was doing was taking pictures. He had not successfully stolen a car. He was just taking pictures and sending them. What he was successfully stealing was sunglasses, chapstick. No, he was brought in for a pair of sunglasses that they were questioning him about, they say. And then they questioned him about Samantha. But what he was brought in for was petty. And people who steal chapstick don't go stab people in the face, especially not strangers. And black men don't make a habit of going into white women's house on a night when they're trying to steal cars to draw attention to themselves. They try to stay away from white women altogether in a moment like that. Sounds prejudiced, but it's true. Because in this society, the first person that will take the finger point, as it was proven, is a black person in the area that's up to no good. They say he stabbed a tire. They didn't even get tire fragments inside the knife that they took from him. None of them. They even took a third one from him. They took 3 of his pocket knives. 2 of them he had in his pocket and 1 was at his house. And all they got when they tested it and processed it was pocket lint. With how deep the wounds were and how little that knife was, there is no way that a drop of blood would not have made it down inside of that knife. And what he had on his person was a little drop on his arm, a couple little specks, little drops. Oh, they washed it off, people say. No, little tiny specks on the arm, washed off or not. If it was a large amount of blood, and we're talking a copious amount of blood that she lost, he would have been covered, not 3 little specks in his shoes. And his shoes had nothing on them. Not a drop. Not 1 drop. The backpack he had stolen and was carrying, he set it down on the ground and picked it up, and somewhere some of her life force got onto the backpack, but I could see that it would have happened when he bent over to check her, because at first he lied and said I didn't touch her, because if he touched her and she's there passed away, the first thing they're going to do is accuse him. But then he finally said, I am going to have to. So I did. I checked her for a pulse, but she was gone. And then, well, why didn't you call 911? Because you guys would put me in jail. I freaking got out of there. I ran. And the next scene, they show him running to Greektown, where people are protesting. And with the copious amount of blood that was all over the place at that time, he would have been covered enough for all these people out protesting to notice a blood-covered man. And they stopped him and they said hello to him, and you could see him on the camera talking to them and then turning around and going on his way, and nothing being questioned about the black man with blood all over him, because he didn't have blood all over him. Now, what they did catch, another thing that they didn't acknowledge, they showed the security guard, and he said, well, I was over in this area patrolling, and they had a moment where they caught Michael Jackson Bolanos in the area across the street from the car parking lot behind Samantha Woll's house. And while he was over across the street, they showed more camera footage of the area. And while they showed his little green circle across the street, at 1 something in the morning, they show a man who, oddly enough, looks an awful lot like Jeffrey Herbstman, the ex. And this guy sprints off across the yard and goes off in the opposite direction. And when asked about, well, what about this man? Well, we couldn't get any video. And they went to the major tower across the street in the school and all that. Nope, we couldn't get any video. And then we found out that the people that control the videos and most of the buildings in this area were members of the synagogue. And if there's ever one thing you ever learn about corruption, it is follow the money. It's always money. So this started to look not so good for the synagogue, because they've got a female president who just brought in more than $5 million in donations for their area, and it's a female president. And I have some feeling that there might have been some animosity in the background that didn't quite come forward. Can't prove anything. I could be wrong. I'm just tossing out some ideas, because there's other angles to this too. It's not just the Jeffrey Herbstman angle. By all means, there was a Republican senator that they didn't want to name. He texted her, or it was her last text was to him. It was a heart emoji. After she took her clothes off, put on some hoodie and sweatpants and went downstairs and got her banana, smoked her vape, laid down on the couch. That's about the last things they know that happened to her, and she texted out that heart emoji. The last person she contacted. Was he ever brought to the stand? No. Questioned about what the conversation was back and forth? No. Did you have plans to go see her? Nothing was ever said. He was never questioned. Why? Well, let's just point out that he's a Republican senator at the time, so he a representative of some kind. And she's a Democratic supporter who Alyssa Slotkin and Dana Nessel and Gretchen Whitmer are all buddy-buddy with, but not a single one of them is saying a word right now about their friend. When they don't have a real answer, they're happy to let an innocent man sit. And that disgusts me. That's not justice. Never, never is it okay to put somebody in jail for somebody else's crime. And so we get through all this, and they put him on the stand, and at the end of everybody lying and misdirecting, and, oh, I don't know, I'm kind of new at this, and this is the kind of case that they had. They all half-assed their answers. I did my part. My job was to process it this far and pass it along to the next person. Even the FBI agent. Nope, I only did this much and passed it along. This is not justice. And we should be outraged. More Michigan residents should be standing up and saying something. And I have been posting about it on Facebook since last September. And then we got to a point where they made the verdict. And then we kind of fizzled out on pushing because it was Michael's request to not push at it. And we all kind of quieted down. But I still prayed. He doesn't belong there for murder for 18 to 20 years. And they brought him for parole already. Right? So the thing is, when they went through the verdict, they found him not guilty of first-degree murder, manslaughter, however you want to word it. And because he was not guilty of that one, he wasn't guilty of the second one either. Those went right off the table. So what was left, really, was lying to the police. And they nailed him for lying to the police and gave him 20 years for lying to the police when everybody in that trial lied. Not a single one of them told the truth. Not one. Except for maybe, oddly enough, the one who'd gone to prison for lying. He come out with it at the end. Well, why do we know that he's telling the truth? Because he has everything to lose. That's how you know. But they didn't put that together because they have everything to hide. And what it is, I don't know, but it's sickening. And it's the state. It's not just one city or one town. We're sitting here with more than just one man in prison, in Michigan, wrongfully, and nobody cares enough to say anything. Nobody wants to rally to defend him. You know what's disgusting is I saw so much support for Wade Wilson down in Florida. TikTok people sending him money for GoFundMes. We tried to set up a GoFundMe for Michael Jackson Bolanos, and we're told that we can't get help with his expenses. But Wade Wilson can, and he's guilty. He's on death row. And it's not the only case that we can find that's been mishandled. But we don't care. It's disgusting the way that the justice system in Michigan has gone. It's time to say something about it. I'm not exactly sure all the steps that we can do to help Michael Jackson Bolanos, but some of the steps that we have taken, we have written to Brian Stevenson, I believe his name was. He's down in New York now. He was a part of the initiative for wrongful incarcerations. He worked with death row people who were on death row wrongfully. And that's why I kind of thought maybe he could give us a hand in where to go. But he did email me back, and he told me that they had so many, and it wasn't directly him, it was somebody from his office, but they told me that they had so many cases that there just wasn't time, but they would add him to the list, and if they could do anything, they would get a hold of me. Well, this has been about half a year now, and they haven't gotten back a hold of me. Well, then Trump gets into office. He elects a woman to be our pardon czar. A woman who sat in prison herself. You would think that a woman who has faced that would have a heart for a person who is wrongfully incarcerated at this point. So a group of us, we emailed TAG. It's taking action. I'm going to have to look it up, but you can find it. If you type in TAG, it'll come right up. And we emailed her, and I still haven't gotten an email back, and Tracy still hasn't gotten an email back. And maybe if more people email the TAG people, we can get something out of it, because he doesn't deserve to look at life for a lie. But what they bring up in his parole was double jeopardy. He's already been found innocent. And I understand that Samantha Woll's family wants answers, and they just don't want to have to go through all the torture and all the pain. They just want to hurry up and have it over, so first come, first serve. Hey, I get it. My mom died, and I don't have any answers, and I get it. But I couldn't do it if I were them. My mom passed away, and I could not. No answer. I could never live with myself if they incarcerated somebody who was innocent. That doesn't take away the pain, and it isn't going to bring Samantha back. But it is destroying another life. And for being godly people, it seems like that wouldn't have even had to have been said. That it would have been the first instinct to say, we need to make sure. Not just point fingers. You have an awful lot of questionable people that did an awful lot of questionable things that you just deemed innocent because they were your friends. Well, I got some news for you. It's usually your friends that hold the knife.